Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. Are you enjoying the spring pollen? If you're in the northern hemisphere, especially in the American Southeast, it is certainly pollen season. I looked out earlier and I thought it was smoke. It's not smoke, it's pollen. Everything is covered in yellow pollen, and I mean, it is thick. It is so thick. When a vehicle passes on the road, it just billows up. It's amazing. And it actually may be heavier this year than a lot of years, because, we had heavy hurricanes, storms, a lot of water, trees put on a lot of new growth. We've had a fairly warm winter, and yeah, we got some serious pollen. Unfortunately, most allergy remedies that are herbal need to be taken in advance of the pollen. Like nettles, for instance, you should take nettle tea. But you'll still be good. It'll still help you now. But it's most effective if you started sipping your nettle tea a month ago. Mullein is one that will help. Mullin's very good for sinus allergies. But it's really not up yet. The tree pollen comes out before the mullein, so you really need to have had last year's mullein. One thing that has been recommended is sweet vernal grass, sweetgrass. A tea made from that is very good for allergies. You can probably order some online. If you don't have any sweetgrass growing in your area, you really should try to grow some though if you can, because it's wonderful stuff. I absolutely love sweetgrass down in Charleston, really all in the Gullah Geechee area, sort of from I guess really you could. Well, there once was sort of a Gullah community in North Carolina, but now it really picks up more around Georgetown, South Carolina, down to like the Sea Islands of Georgia. I don't know if it goes quite as far as St. Mary's. That's really like the last stop before you hit Daytona, Florida. But at least to maybe Brunswick. And yeah, wonderful culture, wonderful people. Love the Gullah Geechee. They make beautiful baskets out of sweetgrass that just smell incredible. If you may have more of an association of sweetgrass as a almost an incense or a smudge used by Western Indian tribes, Native American tribes. Not so much the Eastern at all, but those baskets woven out of sweetgrass have that just incredible scent. And yeah, a tea of that's really good. Uh, if you need something more immediate, this may surprise you. It surprised me. I know. Homeopathy. I've done a whole show on it. People have different feelings about homeopathy. People either swear by it or swear it does nothing. Well, I did not walk into it having any preconception, and my allergies were going crazy. And someone recommended a homeopathic remedy that's a tablet. There are actually two of them, from what I understand. One of them is mostly based on stinging nettles, and the other's based on bee venom. They're just these little sugar tablets. I mean, like I thought this is not going to do anything. Yeah, I looked at the back of the box and I thought there's not an antihistamine here. There's not a strong herb. What there is diluted like 100 times less than I would make an herbal tincture. I thought there's no way this is going to work. Popped one of those suckers in my mouth, and in 30 minutes, my horrible allergies at that point. I mean, my sinuses were swollen shut, my ears were swollen, I couldn't hear very well. My face was red. It was one of the worst allergy attacks I've ever had. It was actually fall allergies, which are much worse for me than spring allergies. Popped one of those suckers, and in 30 minutes, I was fine. I could not believe it. It literally like blew my mind. And so, yeah, I believe homeopathy works. I don't understand it. A lot of people get in touch with me and say, you know, should Christians use homeopathy because it has an energetic component to it? And, some people say it's superstition or slightly occult. I don't think it has anything to do with superstition or the occult. You can look at it two ways. Basically, the controversy comes down to when the homeopathic remedy is made, I think the first part's optional, but it's percussed. Now, a lot of times they'll put it in the sunlight, and then they take the heel of their hand and kind of whack it a couple of times. Does that do anything? I don't know. Back a couple of years ago, you can look up an episode. It was probably episode 20 something. I mean, it's literally been like 3, 4 years ago. I had a conversation with an excellent homeopath who's a very devout Anglican, and she said that she didn't understand it, but she talked with a nuclear physicist, and he said that water has certain properties that are energetic, and that the percussing and the sunlight potentially, I know that's in Bach flower remedies, I'm not sure if it's in all homeopathy, could affect the essentially vibration of the liquid. Now, what does that mean? Is that like woohoo stuff? Not really. You got to remember, if you split an atom and you look into like the smallest particles that make up the universe, eventually you don't find anything solid. Eventually everything is just energy vibrating at a certain frequency. What differentiates a piece of coal from a dog is the vibrational level of that energy at a subatomic level. Now, that's not superstition, that's actually science. Everything we think is solid and real is actually just vibrational frequencies. Really hard for us to understand, but that's scientific fact. Um, the nuclear physicist she spoke with firmly believed that that had an influence over the effectiveness of that tincture. Does it? I don't know. I have no idea. But let's assume it is like some kind of woohoo superstition. Um, and I don't know that it is. I'm saying just for the sake of argument, let's say someone says this is new age stuff and you need to worry about it because it's, superstitious and we're not supposed to believe in such as that. Well, just because one person believes it, why does another person have to believe it? If think about it, in the Bible, St. Paul says, don't question whether the meat you eat that you are eating has been, sacrificed or dedicated to an idol. You know, only if you're going to cause scandal for somebody else, and then you might say I can't eat it because. But he said if your faith's strong, what does it matter? God made the meat. God said everything's good. If someone else takes the meat and out of their superstition sacrifices it to an idol, that really doesn't affect you because you know that idol's not a real God and they're just practicing their own superstition. The meat is still made by God and the meat is still good, and don't turn down any food you're given because it's actually an insult to its creator. And I believe very strongly in that. Never turn down a gift, especially of food, because you're not just insulting the person who's giving it to you. And I mean, I hate McDonald's. If somebody gives me a McDonald's hamburger, I'm going to say thank you very much and be truly appreciative and eat it. That's part of my philosophy of life. You eat what's put on your plate, and you're grateful for what's put on your plate. Well, the same thing holds true for me when it comes to homeopathy. If, percussing or just basically hitting that little vial with the heel of your hand or putting it in the sunlight does nothing, but the person who made the tincture believes it does, it doesn't change the nature of the tincture. Those are still herbs, God's gift to man for health. It's still an experienced practitioner putting it together. Someone, I mean, homeopathy, it takes a lot of study. It is not simple. It is not. I mean, you can get a full degree at a university in this subject in Europe. I mean, it's real serious stuff. Um, I'm still going to use the tincture, and I'm going to be grateful for it. And just because one person thinks that percussing the vial does something energetically to it, doesn't mean I have to believe that. I still experientially can say, hey, that works, and it's good, and all things come from God, and they are good by definition. Now, anything can certainly be misused. There's a way to misuse just about everything on earth. Um, Opium. Opium's a wonderful painkiller, wonderful muscle relaxant. Definitely, absolutely a gift from God for people that have cancer, for instance, and they're in just extreme pain. Can definitely be misused. You can become an addict and you can use it when you don't need it for pain and it can kill you. I mean, anything can be misused, but everything has a proper use as well. And everything is good in and of itself. So, anyway, now let's move on to the subject at hand. I promised last week we were talking about spring ephemerals that I would go into more detail on toothwort. So, before I go to anything else, I'm going to go ahead and fulfill that promise. We're going to talk about toothwort, and it's like I said, it's called toothwort because it has toothed or serrated leaves. Now, it's in the brassica family, and the leaves are very much like mustard. They have that hot, peppery quality. This has sort of a horseradish. The root is like horseradish. I really like this plant because, I love mustard and I love horseradish. I mean, I really love that stuff. I love wasabi. I mean, if you've ever had wasabi, it's like a punch in the face. Um, Love it. Love that kind of stuff. Good hot spicy radishes. That's my tastes tend to go in that direction. Don't know why. Don't really have much Eastern or Central European heritage. Apparently, there is one Polish person in my gene pool somewhere back there, and I got a whole lot of their taste. Well, actually, there are a few Germans as well. So anyway, I got a whole lot of their sense of taste for some reason. But yeah, but then really, a lot of my family does come from France, and especially the mountains of France, which are alpine. So yeah, there's probably more of the French heritage. Yeah, come to think of it. Well, anyway, a few harvested in the early spring make a very nice salad. They're small. You'd have to gather a lot if you were going to make a meal of toothwort. Unless you've got a big patch or you're actually growing it in the garden, which you absolutely could. You could grow it in pots. You're probably not going to have a huge amount, like not enough to make a full meal out of it. But toss them in with a salad, and that pepperiness of the leaves goes wonderfully with more mild greens, like we'll talk about here in just a minute. The next one we're going to talk about is strawberry spinach, which is a very cool plant, and a lot of people are starting to grow it in their gardens. It's one of my favorites, and it's very mild. It's very mild and sweet. It does the berries. It actually has berries that don't have a lot of flavor at all. You throw that in with some toothwort, and you've got a nice salad, especially with a blue cheese dressing or a mustardy vinaigrette. It's just going to be perfect. Ranch to tone down the horseradish punch of the toothwort would be nice. Whatever you like. Um, and they do make an excellent pot herb on their own, just like mustard greens, but I never find enough, so it's just like something I combine with other things. But that root, it is that spicy, pungent horseradish flavor of its cousin, and it's also pleasantly crunchy. Toothwort root is really a refreshing snack just eaten on its own, or you can add to salads. Cooked, it can be used in any way you would use radishes, although it is more pungent. This one is going to give you a little kick. You can toss in a soup. You can add it to a roast, especially roasted meat with onions and carrots. Oh man, with some toothwort or a little bit of horseradish. You kind of use it interchangeably. So good, so absolutely good. I love it. I mean, really, it was really interesting. I was watching a food history video just the other day, and they were talking about the history of goulash, Hungarian goulash, or goulash is, I think it's how it's actually supposed to be pronounced. Not at all what we think of in America. Okay, it's not a mix of macaroni noodles and ground beef and mixed vegetables. That's not it. Okay, real Hungarian goulash, I guess. dates back hundreds of years, maybe even more than 1,000. The Hungarians were on the spice route, and they were mostly herders. They kept sheep and cattle and all that, and so they would move with their flocks, seasonally back and forth. But being on the spice route, they had access to a lot of really exotic spices you don't think about outside of that region that much. They used a lot of cloves. They used a lot of black pepper, hot, pungent spices. They used a lot of onions and garlic. They used a lot of herbs that have antimicrobial properties, and that really adapted them to their semi-nomadic herding kind of lifestyle. And we're talking a very long time ago. We're not talking modern Hungary, which once ruled Europe as the Austro-Hungarian dynasty and has some of those beautiful cathedrals and historic sites in the world. I mean, Hungary is like probably if I had to pick a country to live in Europe right now, it would be Hungary. I really like Viktor Orban. It's just me personally. You may think, hey, he's crazy. No, I think I like him a lot. Um, whether he has ties to Russia or not, I'm not getting into that. There's no love lost for me toward Putin. My best friend. Probably is no longer with us. Disappeared in Odessa. I miss her a lot. So, just don't think it's some kind of loyalty toward whatever. No, I really like Hungarian culture and I really like the people, and I think it's just gorgeous. But anyway, this is going way back before any of that was ever invented. Um, and not to mention they're like the most Catholic country on earth. Hungary and Poland were, I'd be very happy in either of those countries were they not so cold. I'm not that big into cold, believe it or not, even though I live in the mountains. I get enough cold living in the mountains. But anyway, what they would do is before they went out seasonally with their flocks, they would take these big cauldrons, right? And they'd slaughter like one cow for an entire family. And they take all that meat, or if they were shepherds, it would be sheep. If they were goat herds, it would be goat. Whatever their meat was, a good red meat, and they would take it and they would make this giant stew out of it. And they'd put in all these spices that they were getting from Turkey and all over the trade route. Even there were spices coming back the other way from India and from China. I mean, they had a lot of like hot, spicy, pungent spices, antimicrobial herbs, the same that you would use in sausage to keep your meat from going bad. You're talking oregano. You're talking, well, really anything in the mint family, basil, but probably more like thyme. Just thinking about the climate, but they had access to plenty of dried herbs. Sage would certainly have probably factored in, um, and then the onions and garlic, and they would just cook everything in this big pot. And they cook it down, have a big celebration, drink a lot of wine, and everybody just have a big party before they went out. But they would keep cooking it down until all the moisture was gone. And then they would take that meat and they would portion it out and they would hang it up and dry it and smoke it. And it became almost like a cross between beef jerky and a bouillon cube because for the rest of that time on that trail, all they had to do was take a hunk of that heavily spiced, dried, cooked meat, throw it in a pot with some water, an onion if they found some wild onions along the trail, and they had a stew. And that's your traditional goulash. Well, because they were on that trade route, they were also one of the first countries to embrace hot chili. But they found that chilies didn't really keep very well fresh in Hungary, so they grew them and dried them, and that becomes Hungarian paprika. The original was really more like we would think of cayenne pepper. It was a hot pepper, and oftentimes it would be a smoked pepper because, again, this was going into that big stew, and at some point they had tomatoes and all that, and it becomes more the idea of goulash that we think of today. That actually comes from later in the period. That was during the Austro-Hungarian dynasty when they had a lot of interaction with France. Escoffier helped sort of formalize the soup version of goulash as it's known in Europe today. Still very different from the American version, which I don't even know how our version became to be called goulash. It's the exact same dish that you might know as elementary school beef. It's ground beef and frozen mixed vegetables, a can of tomatoes, and some macaroni. Delicious, certainly simple, good, hearty food. More like something that was developed in the Great Depression. But the original Hungarian goulash has cloves in it and has tons of dried paprika. And that, was not original to it, but certainly aided in that. And what a wonderful concept of taking of how to make a survival food. You could take just tons of meat and cook it down until all the water's gone and all those spices and herbs, which are going to keep it preserved, and then dry it and smoke it. And anytime you need food, grab a chunk of it, throw it in a pot with whatever vegetables you got, and you got a fantastic soup. Salt, of course. Salt is, I left out the salt. You can't leave the salt out. Salt is essential to preserving meat. So remember that. But anyway, back to Toothwort. Um, like I said, so good with roast, and it would be fantastic in that soup because it's got that pungency. Uh, but you can also make Toothwort into a prepared horseradish. Just like you go to the store, you get a little bottle of Engelhofer or something, prepared horseradish, put it on a hot dog. However you enjoy horseradish, make a dip out of it. I love horseradish. I actually use it quite a bit. Essential for my cocktail sauce. A lot of people in North Carolina do not put horseradish in their cocktail sauce. I don't like cocktail sauce unless it has horseradish and hot sauce in it and a little bit of lemon. And I mean, that's how I make mine. I don't like it sweet. I like it pungent and spicy. Um, uh, I use horseradish a lot of ways. But anyway, the way you're going to do this is you take that root and you scrub it and get it nice and clean, and then just finely grate it. And from that point, you can actually just mix it with salt and vinegar. That's like traditional English style prepared horseradish, something you'd have on the side with seafood. It's the base for a good tartar sauce. It's, really good. What I normally will do though is mix in a little mayonnaise and a dash of Worcester sauce, and I use that with seafood, just like that. Or that's sort of my version of tartar sauce. I usually don't chop up pickle. I may add a pinch of dill if I'm having fried seafood, but without the dill, without the pickle or anything, it makes a wonderful dipping sauce for fried mushrooms. And I'm a mushroom fanatic. I hunt mushrooms. One of my favorite way to eat them is breaded and deep fried, and then you dip them in that sauce of just prepared horseradish with a little Worcester and mayonnaise. Oh, it is so good. You know where I learned that as a kid? Um, my mom introduced it to me. She went to a TGI Fridays. You remember TGI Fridays? It was the coolest place in the world in the 70s. And even I remember it from the early 80s before it really went downhill in the 90s. And they had fried mushrooms and fried onion rings and all kinds of fried things. And that was the dipping sauce that went with it. And loved it, seriously. I mean, loved it. And I loved TGI Fridays, really. And it went really downhill in the 90s and became basically a gay bar. I don't know how that happened. It was after the movie Cocktail, and it just stopped being real family friendly, and the quality went downhill. And I don't think there are many of them left. But man, it was fantastic when I was a kid. They had cocktails and everything, but I'd get a cherry Coke and some fried mushrooms and onion rings and maybe a burger, and I was like, man, I was in paradise. I'm telling you. All that stuff on the walls and all the weird, funky decor, and the waitresses were always really friendly and funny, and that was like, man, if when I was a kid, like 10 years old, that's where I wanted to go, and we had to go all the way to Fayetteville when we were living in Lumberton, and I guess from the mountains we would have had to go down to Hickory or maybe even towards Charlotte. No, most times we had to go to Charlotte, and it was worth it, 100%. It was great. And there was a great record store there. Oh man, Paradise, I think it was, Paradise Records. And so that was a treat for me, 10, 13 years old. Um, really from like 7 to 13, I would say. Go to TGI Fridays, then go to the record store and find. I always loved just, discovering new music, and that was awesome. It really was. So we talked about Flapsy before. Actually, I don't think we have because I got a little out of alphabetical order. So we're going to get into Flapsy, which is a very hard one to pronounce, and probably next week or the week after that. So I have another recipe on that that's actually interchangeable for this, but it's really good for that horseradish sauce. You can also ferment it. You can put it in. You can do a fermented prepared horseradish. Don't mix vinegar with it. Just salt. Let it lacto ferment. Or you can add it to your sauerkraut or your kimchi. It's really, really good, and it's going to give you a remarkable depth of flavor that you are just not going to get from a store. You can combine the grated roots with turnip and radish roots, carrots and ginger, ferment it together, and it's going to give you such a complex, funky, punch, salty, sour flavor. Wonderful stuff. I've given you my recipe before for redneck kimchi, which is where I just throw in all kinds of stuff and basically make something like kimchi with whatever I like. And oh, it's so good on a hot dog. Just use it like in place of relish. It's spicy, it's sour, it's peppery, it's funky, it's sour like a kraut. It's got a sweetness of the carrots, a little bit of a relish flavor. You can put cucumber in there. You can make it even a little sweet if you want to. I don't. I do a very, very hot, lots of hot peppers in there, and it's quite good. So that wraps up Toothwort. I mentioned strawberry spinach. I got a short entry on this one. We'll just go ahead and get this one out of the way. The plant is in the same family as lamb's quarters, and the leaves can be used absolutely the same. Lamb's quarters are like a very, very mild wild spinach. Strawberry spinach is the same. Some folks prefer strawberry spinach greens to lamb's quarters, especially when they're tender early in the spring. The leaves are a little smaller, but well, smaller than spinach. They're not smaller than lamb's quarters, but they are perfect wild spinach. They are absolutely mellow. A lot of people grow this, have begun growing this in the garden. It's an excellent plant. You can grow it in pots. You can grow it in the garden. Um, it gets its name, though, from its berries. It actually has these little red berries that kind of look like raspberries. Unfortunately, they don't have a lot of flavor. You're really going to grow this one for the leaves, but you can cook. You can eat these berries. They're quite edible. And if you cook them down with some sugar and citrus, especially if you combine them with any other berries, you're going to make an excellent jam or jelly. They're really good. And of course, you could combine them with dandelion flowers or honeysuckle flowers. You can make all kinds of jams and jellies using strawberry spinach berries that are kind of bland as a base. So that really works very well. I just think of it as a nice salad green with a little bonus of a few berries. And it's very cool. It's a great looking plant as well. You could absolutely grow it ornamentally. And I have read that there's some heirloom seed breeders that are trying to improve the flavor of the berries. They've already been successful in producing larger leaves. So, I mean, you can really grow this one as a garden plant, a salad green, or for cooked. So let's, who knows what they're going to come up with those berries. Keep an eye on strawberry spinach. And you can get involved in that breeding project if you want to. Buy some or wild harvest some strawberry spinach, collect the seeds, and from each generation, select the seeds from the sweetest berries. It may take a few years, but eventually you're going to breed a strawberry spinach with a sweeter berry, and your name may go down in history, and you may make a fortune as the plant breeder who came up with the best strawberry spinach. And that would be awesome if you do so. I will absolutely celebrate you and spread your name throughout the world via my podcast and books and everything. And another one though, this one. This is under my okay. Everything I just talked about came from my book, Spring Foraging Cookbook. This one comes from Medicinal Shrubs and Woody Vines. We've also talked about this plant in my book on medicinal trees, but I'm going to talk more of the shrub versions of dogwood today. And really, it's interesting because one of them is a really important wild edible. Cornelia cherry, I believe. Yeah, right. Cornus is the genus that dogwood. That's the dogwood family. And so cornelian cherry is not actually cherry, it's actually a dogwood that produces a sweet berry. Absolutely wonderful, really rare in America. Get one. Get one and plant it. You're going to love it. You're going to love it. And medicinally, dogwoods are one of our most important herbs, really. There are 28 dogwoods with documented use in herbal medicine. And right now they're flowering and putting out tons of pollen. The dogwood has a very long association with Easter. The four petals have a mark on the end that are said to represent the wounds of Christ, pierced hands and feet. The cross was said to have been made from dogwood. Now, who knows if that's true or not? Crown of Thorns was said to be made from hawthorn. Who knows if that's true or not? These are legends that are very much associated with Easter and Christianity. The dogwood was said to be cursed for being used as cross. I don't think God would curse a plant, but He made the plants and they're all good. So let's not get back on that. But the wood is essentially useless for lumber. It is extremely hard. It's knotty, it's twisted, it doesn't grow big enough to make lumber. Uh, so could it have been used as a cross if it grew in a different growth pattern before 2,000 years ago? Maybe, but there's no historical evidence of that. So I'm just going to say it's a really nice history. Of course, it blooms right around Easter. It's very closely associated with Easter, and I love legends and folklore like that. I just think they're a beautiful part of really our traditions, our human nature. I love stories and folklore, and even if they, are weird, and I mean, come on, the Brothers Grimm's fairy tales, they were bizarre. I mean, really bizarre. A lot of those stories were not good to tell to kids. Still, that storytelling tradition passed on, I think is wonderful and just so valuable part of it, just really our human culture. And so I love that kind of thing. One thing about dogwood, though, is I actually use a lot of it in spoon carving. It is so hard, but it's also one of the most sturdy woods for making spoons. And there are a couple of pieces on the site right now. I've got some spalted, well, no, I've got some spalted pear. I don't have any dogwood right now. Yeah, not right now, but I will again soon. Have in the past. The pearwood looks very much like the dogwood, and it's blooming right now too. So I got too confused, but do check that out, JudsonCarrollWoodcraft.com, or I'm sorry, JudsonCarrollWoodcraft.substack.com if you want to see some of my work. And I think there'll be a couple of dogwood pieces still on there, even though they've already sold. You can look back and see what's beautiful wood. It is so hard, especially at the base of the tree, that if you cut it with a chainsaw, it will spark as if you've hit metal. That's how hard dogwood is. But there are, like I said, 28 varieties with documented use in medicine. There are 3 varieties that are in shrub form that are native to my region. There are several other that are in tree form. And then there's, of course, the very small ones. I can't remember the name of that one right now. Well, dwarf dogwood, I guess. They only grow like a foot tall. That's actually a dogwood as well. So it comes in very many forms. Um, the ones that grow in my region, swamp dogwood that's more toward the coast, gray dogwood, and stiff dogwood. Those are all shrub form. And they were once a lot more widely used in herbal medicine. If you talk to most herbalists, they're probably not going to know anything about dogwood. And that's a real shame because especially the Native Americans used them a lot. They're all pretty landscape trees, and most of people just think of them for landscaping now. But a decoction of the bark is very useful for mouth sores, sore throats, diarrhea, and skin inflammations, good for swelling and blisters, and it's also been used for colds and to lower fevers. Dogwood bark especially has a quinine-like substance. So just like we would use quinine for malarial fevers or even for COVID, you can use dogwood, which makes it super important. Poultice of the leaves is good for wounds, and it's anesthetic. That's what I'm trying to say. Anesthetic and analgesic. It actually helps with pain. Adding dogwood leaves and bark to a bath is excellent for sore joints and muscles. I mean, it's really one of the go-tos. Birch, poplar, all those are really good in a bath. They have aspirin-like qualities. Dogwood, because it's more the quinine type quality. Quinine has an anti-inflammatory property, but then dogwood has its own components as well, its own chemical constituents. Let's see, the silky dogwood, Plants for Future says the dried root bark is antiperiodic, means it can help really reduce menstrual bleeding. Astringent, stimulant, mildly tonic, and that means tonic to the stomach. It's bitter, helps with digestion. Flowers are said to have similar properties. A tear tincture of the astringent root bark has been used as a quinine substitute and is also useful in the treatment of chronic diarrhea. It has been employed in the treatment of painful urination, chest congestion, etc. The bark was used as a poultice on external ulcers and a wash for gonorrhea sores. The glycoside cornin, that's the one I was trying to remember, cornin, found in the bark has astringent properties And the fruits are used as a bitter digestive tonic. A tincture of them has been used to restore the tone of the stomach in cases of alcoholism. Resources of the Southern Fields and Forests, my favorite book from the 1860s, speaks specifically of the dogwood known as Cornus florida. Now, it grows throughout the South. It was just first identified in Florida. It says, during the late war, the bark has been employed with great advantage in place of quinine in fevers, particularly in cases of low forms of fever and in dysentery and that of a typhoid character. He says on the river courses, mean from bad water or from actually typhoid, and was given as a substitute for the Peruvian bark. That's quinine specific. Comes originally from Peru. It was called Peruvian bark or the Jesuits' bark long before it was known as quinine. In fact, it is used in almost any case where quinine, the cinchona bark, was used. This well-known plant possesses tonic and intermittent properties. Intermittent fevers. Tonic, again, we're talking for the stomach. Very nearly allied to those of cinchona, that's quinine. And in periodic fevers, one of the most valuable of our indigenous plants. Dr. Gregg states that after employing it for 23 years in the treatment of intermittent fevers, he was satisfied that it was not at all inferior to Peruvian bark, or again, quinine, generally in conjunction with laudanum. What's laudanum? Well, that's an opium tincture. So again, we see how opium has some really good properties if it's used the right way. And in that case, it was being antispasmodic. And yeah, would it get you a little high? Yeah, but if you let that diarrhea go on, you were going to die. So good thing to use, and it actually is astringent as well. And really, if you've ever taken pain medications for a long period of time, they can actually cause constipation. They cause the entire digestive system to kind of slow down. That's very useful in cases of chronic diarrhea where it could actually kill a person. It says it also possesses antiseptic properties. In recent state, it is less stimulating. Fresh, it's less stimulating than the cinchona bark, but it affects the bowels more. The dried bark is the preferable form. The fresh bark will sometimes act as a cathartic. It is more stimulating than Toothwort or Eupatorium, and therefore less applicable during the hot stages of fever. Now, this was Eupatorium, Joe Pyeweed. This is Boneset, American herbs, and I've done whole shows on them. Were very popular during this time for outbreaks of yellow fever and other horrible epidemics. They were Native American medicine that was shared with the settlers that saved whole populations by reducing those fevers. Essential to grow or find in the wild if you're going to use herbal medicine. According to Dr. Walker's examination, the bark contains extractive matter, gums, resins, and tannin and gallic acid, and Dr. Carpenter announces it has a new principle, cornine. So they had already discovered cornine in the mid-1800s. Let's see, Philadelphia Journal of Medicine said dose of the dried bark powder is 26 grains, decoction made with an ounce of the root to 1 pint of water. So that's more how we would use it. We would use bark, or in this case they were using the root to make a strong decoction, or the extract may be employed. Alcohol does extract its virtues, so you can make a tincture and keep it back. The ripe fruit infused in brandy makes an agreeable and useful bitter, which may be a convenient substitute to the article prepared in shops. So you could make a good digestive bitter or bitters to put in your cocktail with dogwood berries, which when I was a kid I was told they were poisonous. They're not. They're just very bitter. You probably wouldn't want to eat a lot of them, Let's see. Dr. O'Keefe in Georgia published an article in the Florida Medical Journal in 1849. Said it was good, did not cause any disturbance of the stomach, as alleged by some writers. Bark is valuable in malignant disorders of horses called yellow water, so it was being used in veterinary medicine as well. And interestingly, this is during the Civil War. They had the North cut off all imports. He says a good writing ink may be made from the bark of the fibrous roots, and the Indians extracted a scarlet color from the plant. So you could make ink out of dogwood too, a dye of some sort. Let's see. Oh, young branches stripped of their bark, rubbed against the teeth, render them extremely white. It is often used for this purpose by people living in the country, so you can use it as a toothbrush. Really good. Where there is need of astringent antiperiodic tonics, reduce menstrual bleeding, the dogwood bark powder will be found to be the best substitute for the Peruvian. Internally and externally, it can be applied wherever cinchona bark would be found serviceable. Quinine again. The dogwood bark in decoction or in cold infusions is believed by many to be the most efficient substitute for quinine in treating malarial fevers. Certainly, it may be used in cases occurring in camp. This was during the war. There was a lot of outbreaks of dysentery and malaria in the camps, especially the further south you got. Let's see if there's anything else here he says that we haven't covered. He says that yeah, again, making bitter tonics for various purposes. Um, and this doctor really liked to use it with laudanum, and he's got a recipe for opium in here. I mean, laudanum, opium tincture. Probably one of the most popular reasons this book hasn't gone out of print. A lot of people want to learn how to do that. I'm not recommending it. It is illegal and can be quite dangerous. Um, but as I said, I have no bias against the opium poppy whatsoever. And for red willow or swamp dogwood's also often called red willow, but it's not. It's actually a dogwood. Grows a lot in the Carolinas, all the way down to Florida. He said the bark was considered by Indians as a favorite combination with tobacco for smoking. Yeah. So in this case, it's red osier dogwood. That's part of the Kinnikinnick mixture. It is actually a slight intoxicant. Really a very interesting plant. Beautiful. Very much planted ornamentally these days. It has these bright red stems, especially in the winter, and makes incredible baskets. I really need to get some growing because it is incredibly valuable plant. If you want to grow a plant and make money, either propagating and selling it as plants or selling the willow, what do they call them? Willow wands, which you weave baskets out of. This is like priority. Red osier dogwood or red willow, swamp dogwood, whatever you want to call it. I think it's Cornus syriaceae. Yeah, syriaceae, if I remember correctly. You can make a fortune off this plant. I mean, this is like next to a lot of people like to grow Japanese maples and sell them, and you can make a ton of money off Japanese maple. Okay, but a lot of those are patented. You can't patent red dogwood, as far as I know. I mean, but you can grow a ton of it, and you can grow it from cuttings, and you can make a fortune selling that plant. I mean, seriously, you get those cuttings rooted in the fall, get them potted up and ready to sell in the spring, and you can really, they're beautiful. People want them. It's that simple. So there's also blood red dogwood. This is another red dogwood. It's less willow-like though, but it's very nice ornamentally. Cornus sanguinea, which means blood-like, essentially. Um, Interesting entry in a pharmaceutical journal. An account of the oil extracted says okay, first of all, he talks about how to extract the oil, but a case of hydrophobia was said to have been cured by it. Now, that's rabies. Now, I'm not going to say it works or it doesn't, but um, if you get bitten by a rabid dog, you probably ought to get to the hospital right away. But yeah, a doctor actually said it cured rabies or hydrophobia. Take that with a grain of salt. I don't know. King's Medical Dispensary, 1898, just says of dogwood in general. Tonic, astringent, slightly stimulant. It forms an excellent substitute for Peruvian bark. It's quinine, having proved efficient in periodic attacks, fevers, when foreign drugs failed. It may be used in cases where quinine is indicated and um, but could not be administered due to an idiosyncrasy, probably an allergy or something. It may be used with advantage as a case where tonics are required in periodical fevers, typhoid fevers. Its internal employment increases the strength and frequency of the pulse. It increases the strength of the pulse. It's interesting. And elevates the temperature of the body, so it helps break a fever. It should be used in the dried state, as the recent bark is apt to derange or upset the stomach. So you want to dry it. You don't want to use dogwood bark in its fresh form because it could cause pain in the abdomen. Useful in headaches, caused by quinine, and yes, a large dose of quinine can cause bad headaches. For general exhaustion and pyrosis, an extract of the bark prepared in boiling water. Okay, so you can just make a decoction of it, or you can make a tincture of it, or use it in the powdered form. Specific indication: use tonic and antiperiodic, intermediate or miasmic fevers, miasmic whatever, headache from quinine, general exhaustion, feeble relaxed tissue, pulse feeble, temperature subnormal, or quinism, that's having taken too much quinine. More modern use. Let's see. Rodale Herb Book says the Indians were the first to use this American native for healing, and the white settlers were quick to add it to their folk medicine. Although the bark was the principal part used, the flowers, leaves, and fruit have also been used. The Delawares, Alabamas, and Humas of Louisiana all use the inner bark to make a febrifuge or fever breaking reducing tea. It is good in low continued forms of fever where the patient is greatly exhausted, reported one 19th century Indian folk healer. During the Civil War, dogwood was one of several native plants which provide a substitute for quinine. Another very good one is tulip poplar, by the way, which was obtained from the bark of the cinchona tree, a Peruvian native, when the South was cut off from supply sources. Botany a Day says dogwood contains varying amounts of cornic acid and the alkaloid cornine, I guess, mostly in the bark and the inner bark. It has a mild narcotic and analgesic effect. The red osier has more of a narcotic effect, by the way, especially helpful for individuals who have negative reactions to Southside lights like willow or aspirin. Southside lights, that's an odd, I don't even know what that means. But if you have a bad reaction to willow or aspirin, it has blood thinning properties. It has salicin, can irritate the stomach. Dogwood is a good substitute. Bark is also quite astringent, which further helps draw down inflamed tissue. I wonder if that's a typo. Southside lights could have been some kind of autocorrect typo for salicin like. You know what? That's probably what it is. I bet that's an autocorrect typo. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense otherwise. And as if someone's just proofreading something and they're not an herbalist, they're not going to know what the heck is being said. So yeah, I'm going to go with that was a typo. Physician's desk reference for herbal medicine tells us it has a cardiac effect. It affects heart activity at different levels up to the cessation of heartbeat. Is examined depending on the concentration of the menthol extract. So the more menthol it actually has in there, the more effect over the heart rate it has. Antispasmodic effect induced malaria in Peking ducks. It's odd. Oh, well, I guess it was a medical test. Well, they gave Peking ducks malaria. Odd. But it was treated for 5 days with the water insoluble fraction of the dogwood. As a result, antispasmodic activity toward the cathomerium could be observed, similar to that as in quinine or sulfadiazine. Sulfadiazine, that's wow, so it's a substitute for sulfadiazine as well. To date, the results cannot be sufficiently assessed. The bark works as a tonic and astringent and a stimulant. Under unproven uses, it says that in North America, the dried bark was used in folk medicine to strengthen and stimulate the appetite for fever, for chronic diarrhea. It is used externally as an astringent for wounds and boils. Formerly, it was used as a replacement for quinine. It is still used for headaches and fatigue. And under health risks and side effects, it says following the proper administration of designated therapeutic doses, none are recorded. So according to the physician's desk reference, used properly, no bad side effects. I would not overdo it. It is a strong herb. It is a very strong plant. All tree medicines are strong, but generally regarded as safe, even by the skeptical allopathic, whatever you want to call it, modern medicine establishment. So y'all, we will wrap it up there. We talked about 3 great plants from 2 of my books, The Spring Foraging Guide and Medicinal Shrubs. This is the time to go out and look for toothwort and strawberry spinach, and if you don't have any growing in your area, just about every seed company I know of carries strawberry spinach seeds. It's become very popular as both an ornamental and an edible. Toothwort you're going to have to find in the wild. But strawberry spinach, you can get that one growing in your garden right now. It is the perfect time of year. and you'll enjoy it. And like I said, try to breed some sweet berries. You never know what you may come up with. Anyway, have a great week. If the pollen is as heavy where you are as it is in the central part of North Carolina where I am today, don't feel bad about wearing a mask. No, I don't believe face masks prevent the spread of viruses. Other than actual saliva, like if you sneeze, your saliva going into someone else's eyes or mouth or something. Well, viruses are like super microscopic. So compared to the fabric weave of a cloth mask, that would be like walking through not just an open doorway, but like an open airport terminal. I mean, it's impossible. As one lady said, if pants don't keep your farts in, how can a mask keep a virus in? And it doesn't make any sense. It's total BS, actually. But the granules of pollen are actually much larger. So don't feel bad about putting on a mask. Yeah, you may look like an idiot, and somebody may think you're paranoid, COVID, brain dead, government believing moron. But this time of year, even if you just put a bandana over your mouth, it can help keep the pollen out of your nose. Not going to help keep it out of your eyes. You're still going to have reactions, but it is effective, and yeah, it's worth looking stupid not to be going around sneezing and blowing your nose and just having a horrible time. But hopefully some of the remedies that we talked about in the beginning of the show will help. Sage tea was one I did not mention. I mentioned sage in terms of food. Sage can really reduce the inflammation of tissue, especially in the mouth and throat where you're taking the tea, but it astringes all tissue and it also reduces secretions. So sage tea is really good for like running nose and a lot of allergy issues. Can kind of dry you up, can cause a little constipation if you have too much of it, but you'd have to have a whole lot. And another really good herb you might have in your kitchen is thyme. Thyme is an expectorant. I often make a tincture of thyme and keep it from when my lungs get congested. Sage and thyme, fantastic. Mint is really good for allergies. So yeah, at least that gives you a few extra solutions if you're suffering right now. Hope you aren't, but it'll soon be over. And pollen does actually have some really great properties too. Most plant pollens are full of B vitamins. Pine pollen, which I'm so allergic to, specifically is very good to increase testosterone in men. You may want to look into that. It's actually one of nature's superfoods. You can eat pine pollen. You can include it in breads and pancakes and such if you want to. And you can get a little pep in your step from it. So, I mean, hey, even though, we look at it and think this is horrible, these awful yellow clouds of pollen, they certainly have their place. I mean, that's what makes the plants, that's how they reproduce. And all that pollen that doesn't go to plant reproduction is really one of nature's most essential fertilizers. That pollen will cover the ground, and all the little flowers and grasses and everything really rely on all that awful pollen coming from the trees right now. So everything has its place. To everything there's a time and a season and a purpose under heaven. So y'all have a great week, and I'll talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, for your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.